Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Triangulation is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Triangulation, episode number 331, recorded January 26, 2018. Max Stossel from Time Well Spent. This episode of Triangulation has been brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully, so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/triangulation. And by ZipRecruiter. Looking for your next great hire? ZipRecruiter offers simple tools and powerful matching technologies to find you qualified candidates efficiently and effectively. It's the smartest way to hire. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/triangulation. Welcome to Triangulation. This is the show where every week we talk to some of the most amazing minds in technology. Today, I am very excited to welcome Max Stossel. He is a poet, a filmmaker, and chief storyteller of Time Well Spent. That's a movement devoted to transforming technology's race for our attention spans. Welcome to the show, Max.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So it seems like 2018 is really like a tipping point so far of people giving up Facebook, investors sending letters to Apple saying, you have to fix the iPhone, make it less appealing to people. Just people seeing that our gadgets are taking more control over our lives than we want them to. So Time Well Spent seems perfectly poised at this point. Tell us about the movement.
So you said it well. Time Well Spent is a movement that is working to reverse the digital attention crisis. Yep, right there, as we'll read it right away, and realign technology with humanity's best interests. We are in a system right now where a lot of the major companies that run our digital world run on advertising models, which inherently means that in order to do better next year than they did this year, they have to extract more human attention. And we have a finite amount of human attention that we get to live in our lives. And this model, not because of any individuals in the system or any, badly intentioned people in these companies, but just the model itself requires extracting as much of our attention as possible. And this industry has gotten fantastic at it, so much so to the point that we need to consider if this is how we want to live our lives. And Time Well Spent is about asking some of these big, hard questions of what can we do to reshape this industry? How can we help people take better control and have better relationships with their devices and technology? But first and foremost, how do we revise this industry from a systemic perspective so that it really is in service of humanity? Because why else would we want technology if it's not helping us?
So I grew up in the 80s. I'm old enough to remember that, MTV and, kids these days, they have such short attention spans. But this is something really different, like we're talking about the attention economy. And I read a quote, and I think it's attributed to a lot of different people, but just the more data there is, the more scarce a resource our attention is. And I mean, this, like you said, this whole economy is working on trying to get our attention, mostly for advertising. But Time Well Spent seems to imply that there's a way that we can get around this, that there's a way that to not have our attention be the bottom line for these companies. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, and just to speak to one point that you mentioned there as well is, you talked about remembering a time when it was different or when attention spans weren't the same. And it's very easy to equate this problem with like, this is just like we used to gossip on the phone and this is just the next version of that. But things are really different this time for a couple of reasons. One is the 24/7 influence, is that no other media had 2 billion people 24/7 connected, checking. I think on average we check our phones about 150 times per day. We didn't have this frequency of data and total access to devices in the past. There weren't 1,000 engineers on the other side of the screen. This is great. You guys are just right on the parts of my website that we need you to be as soon as I start talking about it. But so there were not 150 people or thousands of people on the other side of the screen who were updating it every day to make it more engaging. It wasn't able to integrate our social lives in the way that it does today, and it wasn't so deeply personalized. So it really is. It's a different problem than it has been in the past. We do believe that there's a way forward, and a lot of that really has to do with, first and foremost, separating profits from our attention. That is the biggest piece of this puzzle, because ultimately when, the goal of businesses that are advertising run tend not to be the same primary goal as its users. If your goal is to take as much of my time as possible, if that's how you make the most money, then you're not aligned with how I want to live my life. And so with other models, when we're paying to be not the product, but the customer, there are ways that we can structure some technology that actually cares for us in our lives. So Samsung and Apple and Microsoft are uniquely positioned right now to be able to help protect us from some of these companies that are trying to extract so much of our attention. It is in their best interest to create devices and create products that help us, that help people. And if something that we really want to demand is saying, hey, we're not satisfied with how this works today, we would like a different system, one that really helps me live my life, helps me live by my values. I think we just need to show that there's enough of us, that there's a market for it. And we're starting to see that happen in 2018, as you mentioned.
So you guys are made up of a lot of people who've been working in the industry. You came from advertising. Your founder, Tristan Harris, came from Google, and he's one of the many people that have been showing up on the news lately of, people who worked for Google or for Facebook that say, this isn't what I signed up for. Like, these companies have changed. And Tristan used to work as a design ethicist. Talk a little bit about what that was, and I mean, is he one of these people? I know the people that have used to work at Facebook or have mentored Mark Zuckerberg that are also part of your group. They've sort of said this isn't, this isn't what we signed up for. Is that how Tristan sort of feels about Google too, or is he taking a different stance at this point?
So yeah, Tristan, he made this presentation inside of Google where he said, look, for the first time in history, a handful of designers in Silicon Valley are influencing the thoughts and emotions of 2 billion people every day with our design choices. That is just a huge moral responsibility. And this presentation of his went a bit viral within Google, and he gained the title of design ethicist, where he was researching this problem within Google for a long time. He ultimately, he says he ran into inertia. It wasn't that people didn't want to change or want to do better, but it's very, very hard to change these big systems from within. So over the past couple of years, he founded Time Well Spent, which with the goal of working outside of these systems in order to help change them and change the industry at large. There is the feeling that the ideals of the web, we've come a long way from what the vision was of total open connection and enhancing humanity in that way. I think our team does believe that the internet has lost its way. In terms of specific companies of Google or Facebook or YouTube, part of Google, being specific bad actors, I think we could talk about each of those individually and how they factor into this equation if you'd like. But it's much less a very negative attitude of this is Google's fault, this is Facebook's fault. We're really looking at this problem as in this system of the attention economy, these are the type of problems that are going to happen. Personalization will work in order to grab our attention better than the alternatives would. Addiction works to keep us hooked to our screens. Any ideas we have in our head, it's in the best interest of these algorithms to push some of those ideas to extreme versions of those ideas, because that's effective in keeping our attention on screen. And so these big companies get sort of caught in that system. But I don't think Tristan would speak negatively of his experience at Google or of the people there or the company, but he would absolutely say that we desperately need a shift in the way these companies are acting and the way they're looking at their business models.
So how many of you are there? How many is this your full-time job, or is this everyone's just part-time sort of gig?
We're just starting to really move into full-time work and being a real nonprofit. We're in the middle of a raise right now. And Tristan is full time on this. We have a COO, Randy, who's full time on this. Chief Strategy Officer, Azza, who's full time as well. I am currently part time on this and have been for a couple of years. This really started out for all of us just as this is something we think is deeply important to our future, and we want to work on it. We're just really now ramping up to be a much larger organization.
And how did you get involved?
So my background, we've skipped that part. So when I was in college, my first job was working on doing social media strategy for a startup. They were like, "Hey, you're young, go figure out social media." And I said, "Okay." And I ended up making sales for this personalized health coaching company that was having a lot of trouble making sales. And all of a sudden, the CEO and CMO of that company were like, whoa, what is this? How are you doing this? What is this social media thing? And I thought to myself, look, I can be good at something without having to go to school for it. And I ended up doing social strategy for Budweiser and Dove. I was trained by Gary Vaynerchuk when I told him about what I've been doing at Budweiser, how we boosted their engagement. We got their engagement so far up and everybody is so happy, but no one's actually asking why that matters. And so I worked a little bit with him about how could we actually achieve business goals on social media. But anyway, the important pieces for how this relates to me in Time Well Spent is that I ended up paying extremely close attention to how the Facebook algorithm in particular was affecting society and affecting humanity. I noticed even from Budweiser's perspective, the things that worked on Facebook were extreme statements and telling people stories they already believed. So Budweiser is the greatest beer did a whole lot better than here's how Budweiser is made. And these were people who liked the page, who liked having a drink. And so we would put people having a drink, and that works really well. And who cares what Budweiser is doing, really, right? Like one brand, not a big deal. But I slowly started to watch all the news organizations behaving in the same way, of making their headlines just a little bit more extreme and preaching to their choirs. And all of us, to some extent, changing the very stories we tell based on how these algorithms work. And so I was definitely attuned to that. And I fell in love with startup world in about 2012. And worked on we're going to launch the Instagram for video. This was before Instagram had video. And at that time, I was much less sort of awoken to some of these issues. I was designing notification structures to take people out of their world and bring them into mine, because we were told if we could keep you on our app for 2 minutes or longer, we had a valuable company. And so we were doing everything in our power to achieve that goal. And it was really through conversations with Tristan while I had that job that I was realizing, wow, there's really a difference between what people will do, what we can get, what behaviors that we can make happen, and what people actually want, what leaves us satisfied, what leaves us without regret in terms of how we're spending our time. And so it was around then that I started really helping out Tristan and feeling like, wow, this is one of the most important challenges of our generation, to make sure that we're aligning this incredibly brilliant, magical, powerful technology thing with things that actually matter to us, and making sure it's not the other way around.
So you use Duolingo as an example in one of your talks as a good example of this. It's an app that you can learn a language, and so the time that you spend with that app, you're actually getting something out of it that hopefully is aligned with your values. So is that the idea of time well spent?
So time well spent is really about changing this entire system so that more things can be aligned with our values. But Duolingo is a good example because, well, one, we're customers, right? We're paying for that product, so that makes it much easier for them to achieve this. But my goal going into Duolingo is I want to learn this skill. And then so the engineers wake up and go to work every day trying to help me learn that skill. So we're aligned. Our interests are aligned. And so that I think they measure their success in something like trying to, the stat you probably have there up on the website, but I think it's you learn a semester's worth of language in 34 hours of use. So like they are using all of the tricks they can to help me do a thing that I want to do. So that makes that a very good example. Headspace is another meditation app that's trying to add calm and stress-free mornings to my life. And so if they're waking up every day and going into work and trying to achieve that for me, and when I go into the app, that's also what I want, we have a system there that's going to be able to create a mutually beneficial process and a mutually beneficial outcome. And how beautiful would the world be if more of technology worked that way? What if we design devices to help us disconnect without missing something important? If we design devices for quick in and out uses, right? So that like as soon as we were done with it, as soon as we got the value we needed, it released us back into the world. And what if, similarly, home screens and browsers could promote off-screen choices and not just on-screen choices? What if social media actually helped us create meaningful social interactions in our life, not just online, but helped me spend more time with the people that matter to me? There's a lot of different ways of thinking about some of these technologies that I think if we take a step back, we'd agree is better for the world we want to live in.
So the internet itself was sort of, in many ways, founded on libertarianism. And a libertarian, I'm not personally a libertarian, but a libertarian would say, like, well, it's up to you. Like, you've got to stop using that device, or it's up to you. What would you say to that argument?
So yeah, my father is a very staunch libertarian figure, so I am very used to this this rebuttal. But it's interesting because I personally see what we're working on here as a libertarian solution. I think right now there are not very many options in terms of how we want to live our lives. Right now, the whole game is how do we suck as much attention as possible. And the problem is that we've gotten so good. Like you talked about my video of the dancing panda. I will watch these cute animal videos. I will want to see what Trump said about, the new outrageous thing. There are some things that just work at grabbing our attention, and we've gotten so good at it. We have to, I think, take a little bit of a different model of how humans work and understand that we are persuadable and there are sort of triggers, instincts that we will react to. And we've reached a point that that it's a little bit beyond self-control. And I would love to see a sort of free market competition type solution to this problem popping up, where Microsoft and Samsung and Apple have different versions of how we could live meaningful, fulfilling lives, and they're competing to let me choose which one of those I want. But right now, we're in sort of a bit of a monopolistic territory with a lot of this stuff, and there's not very much choice and not very much competition in the market, and I would love to see that change.
Well, you brought up your dancing panda video, which is there's very little, if no, actual dancing pandas in it. I should warn everyone first.
There's zero.
But it's a great video, and I have. Were you always a poet? Like being a poet and a filmmaker, was that your dream? We're watching the video right now. If you're watching the video, was that always your dream? And was the advertising and that stuff just sort of the money making side of things?
I think so. I didn't realize I was a poet until 3-4 years ago. I heard a poet named InQ perform, and I really liked it. And on the way home, I started writing and thinking, and the first 2 lines of what I wrote rhymed. And so I was like, all right, maybe I can do this. And so I finished that poem. I saw him the next day and was like, dude, I wrote this thing after your performance. Do you want to hear it? And he sort of rolled his eyes and was like, oh, okay. And I performed it for him. And he said, wow, you should really think about pursuing this. And I was writing while I was in other jobs. But really, the reason that poetry speaks to me is that rhyme and rhythm help us listen in ways that we wouldn't ordinarily. It was actually sort of a result of my passion for like understanding human attention and how do you get people to focus through a story. And in today's world where our attention spans, as you mentioned, are so short, I found poetry is a helpful tool that helps people listen to a message that I think is important. And then with my background in content and understanding the internet as I do, when people would ask me to send them my poetry, I would write it out and I'd be about to email it. And I just think, this is just not the same in this digital environment as it is in the performance. And so the films were a consequence of that.
So I mean, I think I understand this, but I'd like to hear you explain it, that, storytelling, filmmaking, you're trying to keep people's attention as well. How is that different than Candy Crush?
For sure. That's something I battle with regularly, is that I have to convince myself that the messages that I'm putting out are worthwhile. I take an attitude with my content that I only want people's attention if I am working so hard and taking such dear care to make sure that it is really valuable or an important message for them to see. I almost never share things on social media. Because I'm incredibly sensitive about taking anyone else's time. I wish there were other ways of getting my message out that weren't in this same system. And this is the catch-22 of all of this, is that it's not evil. It's not all good or all bad. And you also have to play in the system in order to change it, I believe. But it's absolutely hypocritical, and it's something that I have to rationalize to myself. And I work very hard to make sure that when I put a message out, it is succinct and important to the people who are hearing it, and I try to shut up all the other time.
Well, I mean, you have another great video, Subway Love, that went viral. That is just basically, I encourage everyone to go watch it. Search for Subway Love on Google, YouTube, and it's just really about paying attention and about looking around, and also about the subway. Anyone who takes the subway or public transportation will be able to relate to it. But if you spend the 6 minutes or however long it is watching it, I didn't feel bad afterwards. I mean, that's the difference, right? Like if I spend 6 minutes maybe reading something on Facebook where people aren't at all concerned about wasting my time, I feel bad afterwards. So that's the difference. But how do you change that? I mean, different things make different people feel bad.
Totally. But so how amazing would a world be in which technology were working to best understand that for each of us? What leaves us feeling fulfilled? What leaves us feeling energized and satisfied? And so what were those experiences? And we could develop a relationship with our devices where after, whether it's in our calendar, however it might actually literally go down, where we could rate experiences in our lives and tell our devices what was fulfilling and what was not. And we use some of this incredible data and some of these same algorithms to actually optimize for those processes, to optimize for leaving us filled up. That's the world that I want to live in. This is and I don't think, or actually, if you go into the footer of the website, you can find this too, of these app ratings from Moment. Moment is an app that lets you screenshot your battery life. And then it tells you how much time you spent on each app. And then it asks you, which of these do you regret using? And which are you happy with your time spent on these apps? And it's really interesting if you look at the results, and I can send you these after as well. If you go all the way to the bottom of the page, there's app ratings. And like in the footer. There you go. So you have here on the left, you have most happy. These are the apps where people were satisfied with their use. You have a lot of meditation apps, a lot of utilities, and you have apps where people are taking in information from audio, where our visual attention is not captured in the same way. People tend to be satisfied with that use. And on the right, you have dating apps, social media, and gaming for the most part, where people are spending, significantly longer, 61 minutes, 97 minutes, 78 minutes, spending far longer and are unhappy with that use. And so if my job when I was in tech was to figure out how to keep people for longer, I was arguably figuring out how to make people more unhappy and have more regret with their use. That's something is off there. We don't want to wake up and go to work to do that. And on this sort of second part here, you have Facebook's probably a good example to use. Facebook, it looks like the average happy user is spending about 20 minutes. The average unhappy user was spending about an hour. So like there again, people who are using this stuff less are more satisfied. So there's something off in how that works. And I like the way you put, it makes me feel very good that you didn't feel regret after watching my videos. I work very hard to make that the case. But yeah, what sort of content makes us feel satisfied? And not just content, what experiences, what of all of the choices on life's menu? And as I look back at my work, a lot of it is connected, because what Subway Love is really about is seizing the opportunity of a moment. And I want tech's help with that. Tech can scan my environment and scan all the possibilities and data of my life and the lives of people around me and people who are similar to me, and give me a menu of options that is most empowering to all of the choices on and off screen in my life. It would be so beautiful if the world could really operate that way. And I hope that in 2018 we start to shift towards that world.
Do you think that some of the reticence to do that is a privacy issue, or people just thinking maybe I don't want my devices to know that much about how I'm feeling and what I love and what makes me feel good?
They certainly know anyway, right?
Well, they know what I'm going to buy, right? That's I sort of feel a little bit. It's like Amazon has all this data about me and Facebook has all this data about me. I'm more comfortable with the Amazon data for some reason, because it's really just focused on what I'm buying, as opposed to Facebook when they're messing with, if we show her more pictures of dogs, she's going to stay here longer. Somehow that feels worse.
I agree. And yeah, because you're more like the customer in the Amazon relationship, right? And more like the product in the Facebook relationship. But Facebook also, when Facebook released their emojis, I was terrified. I was thinking, oh my God, all of a sudden they're going to have this emotional data. And in this system that we live in right now, I don't feel great about some of these companies having so much information about me because they're not on my team. Their goal is not the same as my goal. But if we can create a different system where we really are aligned, like I am totally happy with Duolingo knowing my emotional data in terms of if I really want to, am dedicated to learning a language, like, yeah, they can know much more about what they need to know to make that happen. So like in the system we're in now, I agree. It's creepy to let tech companies know so much about me, that they can know like, my feelings and my thoughts and all the things that matter most to me in my life. But in a world where we're actually aligned, I don't think that's the case. And also, if we're looking at social media, I'll admit, with fear that she'll watch this, that I spent a decent amount of this morning stalking my ex-girlfriend on social media because I re-downloaded Instagram because I had to do one thing on it. She popped up first because Instagram knows what is most important to me there, right? They've seen through my patterns and behavior what pulls on my emotional strings, even if I haven't actively told them. And so it starts to get an idea of what drives us emotionally anyway, right? The things that we react to are things that drive us in some way emotionally. It's just right now not taking into account whether that's an emotional positive or negative or how that leaves me feeling. It's just sort of artificially registering that there's some sort of emotional thing happening here, and that's getting me to engage.
And I'm glad you said that because I think people are not willing to admit that a lot of times. And I think we focus on kids and social media, like, oh, kids are so obsessed with likes and kids are so obsessed with FOMO and curating their appearance on social media. But I think it's also just as bad, if not worse, so many times that we just don't go around admitting like how much time we spend, looking at various things that we feel bad afterwards. I don't know if I had a question. I just wanted to say thank you.
I can riff
honest.
on you. So I've been giving a bunch of talks at schools, at high schools and colleges and things of that nature. And it's funny, the teachers and the faculty are often, they're asking me, so what are the kids doing on social media? And what's interesting is that, the kids aren't doing much very differently on social media than we are. It's not so different there. It's that the adults are acting like kids on social media, caring so much about the popularity and the likes. And, it activates this human part of us, right? And it's certainly not just a kid's problem. It's very much messing with the social fabric of our personal lives. That is, Instagram planted thoughts in my head that I didn't mean to have today. Instagram reminded me of a whole lot of stuff that I didn't intend to think about. And it's very, I'm very sensitive in this area, of course. And a relationship is a powerful, transformative thing, and breakups are hard. So, of course, this is going to be a tool that is very usable to get my attention and hold my attention. And it works. And Instagram isn't making so many value judgments about whether what works is good or bad. And Instagram's not a terrible actor here. But it's not great, but it's not as bad as some of the others. But I think you get the idea.
So we also have a chat room that is commenting as we're talking, and R. Campbell asks a question: why would a for-profit company do something that makes customers less addicted to their software if it's not in their best interest, not in the best interest of their board of directors? How do we change what motivates companies to value customer happiness?
Yeah, that is a great question and an important question. And a lot of this is about fundamentally questioning the model of advertising, right? Because advertising is the key component here that is different, where my best interest is not to spend as much time as possible on this thing, but that is what is driving the stock price up. It's worth questioning, like, we think, well, if Facebook were, moved to a subscription model or something different, well, then do we create this inequality of some people can afford it and some people don't? But it's also worth thinking, like, how much of our wireless bill a month, or how much of our data plan a month, comes from the space being used by ads. It takes up a ton of that processing power and a ton of that time. It would be really cool. And if there's anyone out there any listeners who want to dive into this project, it's one we're interested in doing, but really better understanding the economic cost of free, right? Of having an ad-based model. What is that actually costing us elsewhere? And how much would it really cost us to switch to something else? Because you're right, there is not an economic incentive to take care of users, or not enough of one. These companies can make things better, but they can't do so much. They can't do what's necessary. They can't create the world we want to live in while they're on an ad model. But so it would be really great to start to get a much better understanding of how much free is really costing us, especially when you consider the externalities we're indebted to and the life that we could live if we start to shift that.
So speaking of free and advertising support of our show is still ad supported. So I do need to take a second to take a break and thank our sponsor, Rocket Mortgage. And we thank Rocket Mortgage because they do help us make this show free. So while you're listening to this ad, feel free to take a drink of water, take deep breaths while you're listening, all of the good things that are healthy for you. The mortgage experience, if you've bought a house, if you've refinanced your house, your loan recently, you know that the mortgage experience is frustrating. It's annoying. You have to put on pants and go to a place, maybe even if, put on a tie, a dress, and go talk to someone, and it can be frustrating. And for those of us who do love our technology and want technology to help us feel better, Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans came up with a solution for that so that you don't have to put on pants. You can just go to your device and it will help you get a mortgage. It will give you confidence. Confidence is something we need when it comes to buying a house or refinancing our existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple. You can fully understand all the details. Don't be confused. You're getting the right mortgage for you. It's convenient. So if you see the perfect house and you say, I want to buy this, you still need to get a mortgage, you can do it from your smartphone right there at the open house. They have trusted partners. You share your financial information, just a touch of a button. It's powerful. So if you're looking to buy your first home or your 10th home, Rocket Mortgage can perform thousands of calculations in just seconds based on your income, your assets, and your credit. Rocket Mortgage can analyze all of the home loan options for which you qualify and then find the one that's right for you. You can apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/triangulation. That's rocketmortgage.com/triangulation. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org, number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support of this show. I am talking to Max Stossel. He is a poet, a filmmaker, and also one of the chief storyteller of Time Well Spent, an organization, a movement that's trying to help us figure out better ways to spend time with our devices. I know Time Well Spent is also working on putting political pressure on companies to try to make this change. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So with my staunch libertarian father, this is one that I have some mixed feelings about. But I think, most libertarians would agree that you need some form of EPA. They would vary on the size, but just a capitalist system naturally creates a lot of sort of pollution and destruction of our environment. So you need some sort of protection of that resource. And there's really interesting sort of analogies to be made where this artificial intelligence or these algorithms start to treat us and our finite amount of attention as a resource. They see, look, this is Max. This is not Max with hopes and dreams and what he wants to do with his life. This is human being Max, male, 28 years old, who likes this, and this, and has 24 hours of attention and this many dollars to extract. And so I think the political pressure here is ultimately these companies haven't done a great job so far of regulating themselves, and I don't know what we, I don't know what else we can, we're going to try to inspire without regulation to have some of these changes happen, but ultimately government is one of the levers that can make change here. I am encouraging us within our organization to be very careful that we don't let governments have access to too much of these systems, where I think that creates a recipe for totalitarianism, where you combine all these data with the ability to lock people up and kill people without consequence. That's what governments can do. But ultimately, governments can pressure technology companies towards more humane business models by Another way is including the negative externalities of like attention extraction. So, if you are stealing this much attention from somebody, maybe there are financial costs of that in a balance sheet. And we're also just advising governments who don't understand this problem very well, just to try to help them better understand what's going on. I think you could probably say that a year or so ago, many government officials didn't know what Twitter was. So there's ground to be made up there.
Mm-hmm. So I brought this up earlier, the letter that the Apple investors sent, or that they sent to Apple, saying it's your moral responsibility to make the iPhone less appealing to kids, and basically they put it in still a company bottom line issue that they might get sued later because this might turn out to be like tobacco and kids. What do you think about that angle of still saying, you're not lining up with our values, but because of that, it's going to hurt your bottom line?
I mean, I love it. I want to believe it, and I'm open to any sort of ideas that help line up what we really want as a society and as human beings with the bottom line, because ultimately that's how a lot of change will happen from these corporations. It makes sense to me, and I do believe it is in the long-term best interest of a lot of these companies to take care of us. But it's very tough to think that way in the current business climate. So I was thrilled with that letter. I'm thrilled. I'll be thrilled. I hope to be thrilled to see how Apple responds. But Apple really is uniquely positioned right now because they don't rely on very much advertising in their business model. They really can be a protector, and I'm hopeful that they will. Whether it's the next product or the one after that, is really a different sort of innovation than we've seen from them in the past couple of years. Kind of getting back to some of their brand roots about thinking different and really being an empowering company. And I think they're in position to do that. And yeah, maybe it'll even be better for the bottom line too.
What do you think of like the Apple Watch? Because I have an Apple Watch, and the reason why I got it in the first place was the promise of you'll be looking at your phone less because you won't have to pick it up and get all distracted. But I find that a lot of times it really makes things worse. I get more notifications. I'm more distracted. Do you think that something like an Apple Watch is what you're talking about?
So yeah, that was. I had a similar idea as you of like, oh, this could be great. Like this will be little cards. It can give me the information that I need, and then it can release, and I can get that. But in practice, I think just with the interface and the small amount of space you have, like it just didn't work as a whole system. Was what I found. So I mean, the idea there I think is quite interesting. That allowing you, like that concept of allowing you to get what you need and release, and to have like sort of quick, only the notifications you really need, do that and be on your phone less. That is a very appealing concept. But I think both just a watch I don't think a watch is the answer there because of just also some of the challenges of literally dealing with it. It just wasn't very easy to do what you needed to do on it. And so, that was one where I was conceptually very interested, but in reality, I don't think lived up to what that hope was. Is that how you felt as well?
Yeah, I still use it, but I don't know that it. I think for me, it's more of I use it as like a fitness tracker, and I think I'm a little bit addicted to it telling not the workout itself, but whether I get notifications that I'm working out. So I don't know. Maybe in the long term, it's healthier, but who knows? Yeah,
and that's an interesting use as well. And again, we can come off as time well spent, very critical or doomsday of this ecosystem and of the state of technology. Of course, there's incredible benefit and incredible power in connecting us, and there's so much good that technology can do. It just doesn't seem that as a society we're being at all realistic about the harms that are actually happening. And so that's a big part of the role that we serve in society right now.
And yeah, I think that's the idea of time well spent. You're not saying don't have any more time on it with any devices. It's just use it wisely. So what about news? What do you think needs to change about the way, about news and our attention?
Oh boy, this is one of the real. News got caught in the crossfire of this system, right? It was. In the game to capture as much attention as possible, news became an incredibly powerful way of grabbing and holding attention. And especially on Facebook over the past couple of years, it got bad, and I'm tentatively excited with this most recent algorithm change. Obviously, Facebook has such a long way to go, but I am excited because it appears from my personal experience there's just like a lot less news, period, on Facebook. And I think given the type of news that gets around on Facebook, that's just probably a good thing. Once an idea is in somebody's mind, whether it's fake news or exaggerated news, or conspiracy theories, whatever it is, once that is in somebody's mind, it is very hard to undo a sort of thought. And so I think it will take society a long time, if we ever can, to reverse some of the effects of what happened in this little experiment where Facebook was such a major driver of news for such a long period of time. I think we need a system that is, I don't have the answers. I don't want to pretend to have the answers, but I think we need to have this not be based on what is the grabbiest or what is the most exciting or what is the scariest. We need to start thinking about how can we pay for a sort of news system that is really diligently in search of truth and in search of, did this happen or did this not happen? And sort of aware of its biases and where it's coming from, and helping people see opposite sides of an equation. That's very hard. Some people think Facebook should just show more of the other side, but studies show that actually that can root people further into their beliefs. It's very challenging to help people see opinions from a worldview that is different from their own. But we need to be thinking about, why do we have news? We need to be asking that question. What is the purpose that news serves in our lives? Because I will say personally, most of the time when I am diving into news holes, I am stressed. I am, my heart is racing, and I feel very little that I can actually do. There's not much empowerment from this process. I don't actually feel often more informed. I feel it creates more questions than answers. It's how can we actually approach news in a way that, in the same bigger ecosystem of time well spent, what role does news have in our lives? What slots should that fit in our day? It probably shouldn't be 24/7. We probably shouldn't be looking at the news all day, every day, especially in a world where we all have cameras in our pockets and can see all the problems that have ever existed for all of time. That sounds like a recipe to really stress us out without being able to give solutions. So I think we need to take a different look. News was initially, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but news was initially like a necessity, right? There was a scarcity of information. There is now a scarcity of attention and a surplus of information. So that supply and demand chart has shifted, and news has not shifted with it.
So it's not, this isn't a new problem, that news has always been designed to scare us or, titillate us or whatever it is. And, before, when it was just TV, it was looking at the commercials. But the problem really is the notifications, right? Like we're constantly getting them. We're plugged into Twitter. That's the problem. And so you want to say to corporations, you don't want to change people's psychology. You want to say to corporations, don't put in the opportunity to have notifications. Like, what would you say to a news app?
Right. And they're in a tough place as well. And we run into the advertising model stuff as well. And by the way, you're running ads on this, of course, we're all in the system. I'm creating content to put on the internet. It's I don't mean to demonize anybody by any means. This is where we're at, and we have to meet people where they're at. But I do think it's important for us to consider what alternatives might look like. But so, excuse me, I don't think it's realistic to try and get news apps to stop sending notifications. I would love for it to be the case. But even beyond just that they're sending notifications, it's poured this whole attention economy has poured gasoline on the fire. Yes, news has always been exaggerated. Sorry, I have a coughing fit coming. And we're back. I do think I don't think it's realistic to ask them to stop sending notifications. I would love for them to see what value they can really provide to their readers. What would their readers be willing to pay for? How can you really be adding that level of value to the people that you're giving information to? Because this system where we play into these filter bubbles and play into these extreme ideas just has created a world, has really broken news. Our trust in media is at the lowest it's been in a long time. And I think there's going to be, in this distrust, we're going to start to have to look, okay, who can we actually trust? Who can we look to? I'm very excited. I personally am willing to pay for a subscription to something that like is just really not political, not partisan, and just desperately in search of truth. I think we're going to start to see demand for that, and I would be excited for a news organization to step into that space.
So what about, I know Facebook gets a lot of attention because it seems to be that we're connecting to people, but we're not really. Whereas I think direct messaging, people are finding that they're getting more quality interaction from direct messaging. Would you say direct messaging is time well spent?
So time well spent is really about like lasting choices that leave us feeling filled up and not having regrets and upholding the things that together as a society we care about. What is time well spent for each person absolutely varies. But, is ultimately, I think, a more time well spent version of Messenger would be something that is about coordinating to do the things you care about. Is it probably more fulfilling to message than it is to like scroll? Yeah, that probably is a more fulfilling use of time. But we really want to open up and Facebook, I think, is what you're referring to, is emphasizing a lot more comments because they feel that's better time spent. But let's really open wider and really think bigger about what is time well spent for people. What are the choices we can empower off screen? What are the meaningful relationships that we can create, and what are the meaningful experiences that we can add into people's lives? Sometimes the most meaningful thing for a person to do is pick up the phone and call their mom, right? Like sometimes that wouldn't be on the menu of what's in a feed. But if we can think bigger than just the options we're used to, we can start to create a much more satisfying use of our time.
I want to thank another one of our sponsors today, and that's ZipRecruiter. And if you are in charge of hiring, or if you've ever hired, or even if you've ever looked for a job, which most of us, I would hope, have, you'll know how hard it is. And this is another place where technology can help us make things easier, take some of the stress out of something that is not so much fun. ZipRecruiter has done a better job of transforming this. It is a smarter way to hire than the way you've doing it in the past. They'll post your job on so many websites, all of the world's leading job boards. You just write up the job post and click once, and it goes all the way out there. You don't have to search around for those. And they actively look for the qualified candidates and then invite them to apply. So if you've ever applied for a job and felt like, I'm never going to be found, ZipRecruiter is helping you be found for the job that you want. You can make your hiring process more efficient and more effective. They even review every application to identify the top candidates, so you never miss a great match. If you're in charge of hiring, it's exhausting to go through all of those applications, and sometimes you don't get to the bottom of the pile, and the person that is best for the job might be at the bottom of the pile. ZipRecruiter goes through the pile for you. It's no wonder 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a high-quality candidate through the site and in just one day. You can find out why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes and industries to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, you can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/triangulation. That's ZipRecruiter.com/triangulation. I'm going to say it one more time so you hear it. ZipRecruiter.com/triangulation. And we thank ZipRecruiter for sponsoring Triangulation. I want to ask you about another movie, another film that you made that's available online called Stop Making Murderers Famous. And you guys can Google it to watch it. I highly recommend that you do. Tell us a little bit about that film.
So I was, after the Oregon shooting, I watched a video of that sheriff saying, "I will not name the shooter. I will not give him the credit that he probably sought prior to this horrific and cowardly act." And then that was immediately cut to a clip of a woman on CNN saying, "Oh, we have his name. We're reporting it. Here he is. Here's his life story." And that just felt like such a disconnect between what actually was needed on the ground, what was best for the situation, and what the media needed to do for clicks and likes and attraction. And so I looked into it, and it turns out there's a very real copycat effect that happens from the coverage of these shootings. A small portion of people, a very, very small portion of people, but someone sees all the attention and all the coverage in our attention-hungry world and craves this infamy in a sort of sick way. And I thought, all right, well, if people just knew this, they would stop, right? Nobody wants to contribute to this system. But it was a learning experience of its own. But ultimately, I felt gun control was so polarizing, but we could all agree on this. And it was a call to media to more responsibly tell the stories of mass shootings and of terrorism and of things that, in a similar sort of time well spent type way, that we don't actually want to put our attention on, but will sort of grab us and has these negative consequences from spending our attention on these types of stories. So that video was really a call to shift that, and I worked with some digital media organizations on creating a policy. You can find that at nonfamous.org that we sort of agreed upon was a way of not completely omitting these stories from the news, but keeping the infamy that shooters seek out of the story.
I feel like one of the big changes of all this news and the scary news and the threatening news is the way we consume it. And I know we talked before about how kids are really no different than adults, but it is a different issue, I think, with kids because they are consuming this news often alone on their devices, and it is different. It's different than the way I grew up. If I was going to hear some horrible story on the news, it would be the TV in the living room, And I think this made me think about you're talking about when you hear about a shooter, it influences you in a certain way. It made me think of Logan Paul, the YouTuber whose name some other people also don't say, and his video that he showed of a suicide victim and how so the big issue there was mostly just the fact that so many kids followed him. And so what would you say about just the way we're consuming this news and how that's different?
Sure. So, it's interesting that you talk about the literal format, and that video was made for mobile. If you want to watch it, it sort of takes place inside of a Facebook feed. And so what's interesting there is that we're often just seeing headlines, right? We're just seeing headline and caption, headline and caption, headline and caption. And what is it? It's headline, caption, cat photo, person on the beach, and headline, caption. So everything takes up the sort of same amount of space. And so I think it is and I don't want to say easy, but easy for kids to sort of confuse the different degrees of that attention in a world that is so gamified for likes and for views. So something like, when Logan Paul sees an opportunity for engagement, he makes it about himself. There's this sort of thoughtlessness that can happen very naturally when we get too caught up in that game. And it's easy. It is easy to get too caught up and too like-hungry, attention-hungry, especially as a kid. You remember what it was like to be in high school, and now it's just all quantified and gamified of that popularity and that attention. And so I think that is different. It's different how we're consuming this content, and that it's 24/7. And that absolutely has an impact that honestly we can only understand a little bit about, and we'll see what that does to this generation of kids growing up with these devices while we're still figuring out how to make this technology most beneficial for people. This is a great human experiment, right? And great being large, not fantastic.
And so what I know you talked a little bit about what the teachers and parents want to know, but what about the kids when you speak at high schools? What are you finding? Is there anything that surprises you when you give your talks at high schools? There's
a sense of relief when you talk about the specific ways that some tech products are designed to be addictive, or you talk about variable rewards and the slot machines and snap streaks, and why did they invent snap streaks, and having these conversations there's a sense of relief, I think, because they have so much stress and anxiety around their phones and feel so attached. So I was surprised to see that sort of emotion come through. Sometimes I go in, I talk, and they're like, oh, that was cool. And then, they leave and they go right back about all the same behaviors. It's very hard to change our behaviors on these devices. But I think the kids have enjoyed having a space to talk about some of these things that seem invisible, or that people just aren't talking about how much it affects their lives. And it's tough to really understand exactly what's going on, and how, like maybe my number of streaks with this person back and forth shouldn't actually define the strength of our friendship. And like, maybe that's a silly thing to have be a definition of that, but it feels that way. And why is that? And just to give them some of the tools to talk about what they are feeling, because this stuff does have such a very strong emotional impact on their lives.
Yeah, I find that Snapchat is a tough one. I have 3 teenage children, and when I go on about snap streaks, and exactly, I read what you said about them, and I thought, oh, someone else is saying this, that it's just crazy that this company, this public company, has tried to monetize children's friendships with each other. I mean, that's basically what it is. But parents don't really know, because they don't most adults, I mean, most parents don't use Snapchat, and that I know, and so they don't really understand this. It's more hidden. I mean, they understand Instagram, they understand Facebook, and just, how likes can affect you, but I think the Snapchat.
So how do your kids feel about it?
Well, I think the snap streaks, I've talked about that, especially because a lot of them are they have streaks with people they aren't even really friends with, or, they will get in fights with their friends, but then they'll keep their streak. And so we'll have conversations about like, well, you're not talking to that person. How can you, and then I found that my older daughter just sort of grew out of it, like a lot of the things that kids grow out of.
Yeah.
It just, it's like one person was like, that's weird. And so, suddenly it's weird. So it's positive peer pressure, I guess. But I guess my point is that it's a lot of these, I think Snapchat must know that that this is what they're doing, and that parents don't really know and aren't paying attention. They're not, the people that work for Snapchat are not bad people, but it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the bottom line.
Yeah. Ooh, how do we grab as much of this attention as possible? And I think it's easy to rationalize, I can say from experience, of when you're building these products, of it's like, well, no, I'm not making anybody do anything they don't want to do. Look, kids like streaks. Look how much they complain when we get a streak wrong, or when their streak accidentally gets canceled. They desperately want it back. Look, they love this so much. It's just, we're not doing a very good job of measuring actual satisfaction. We're measuring behavior. And I think these devices, as we can all attest to, are, we will behave in ways on these devices that we're not proud of, and that we don't actually feel good about the time we're spending. And so we need to start changing how we measure where the bar is as people. For advertisers, it's been great, and it will continue to go that way.
So a lot of people, especially the news, will talk about this in terms of tech addiction, but you guys don't really talk about that very much. I mean, what are your feelings about like actual tech addiction, which exists?
How are we defining tech addiction?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I guess, people that feel they have to, there are rehab places, and I guess using your technology in such a way that it is affecting other parts of your life. I guess we are talking about that in that sense. I mean, you're talking about not being happy afterwards.
Right. And so I know what you mean, that there are people who go to rehab for this. I'm flipping the question back on you, just because I think you could argue in many ways that we're all addicted to these devices. Mm-hmm. But there is another level of this, and especially with gaming, like there are some people who, are spending huge amounts of money that they can't afford on gaming apps, and they delete them and they re-download them, and they reach out to the companies and say, please don't let me download this again. And they don't listen to them. And that's a whole nother system that feels pretty shady and gross. But I think it's, it's tough to really pinpoint the definition of addiction here. But it sure feels like we're, if somebody got out of prison, and was there for the past 20 years and would look around at the world today, I would bet that they would argue that everybody they know has an addiction.
That's true. So you're a writer. How do you keep from being distracted by your devices? Like, what are some things that you do?
It's an ongoing process. I have learned to phone on airplane mode when I'm writing, nothing in or out, and really setting the time to do that. But yeah, but to be honest, I struggled. Like, part of the reason I'm so passionate about this is that I don't feel I have I really want better control, and I don't feel I have good self-control. And also for poetry, the rhythm of my phone notepad and typing, that speed is very good for me. So I like to be able to do it on my phone. And then turning it off airplane mode is just one swipe away. So when writing gets hard, it's very easy to go into that space. But studies show having the phone literally outside of the room for focused tasks, we perform better on those tasks when that's the case. And that's what I tell parents and kids for studying as well. And in the classroom as well, just having a little phone cubby at the door or checking the phones when you go into school. And just so you can be more focused on whatever you're doing if you're trying to accomplish a task. So if you're not using the phone for the task that you really want to get done, putting it outside the room is very helpful.
And what about if you are using the phone for the task?
If you are using the phone for the task, so we have something on our website called Take Control, which is some sort of band-aids in the attention economy, ways of helping better manage your relationship with your device. The first that you'll see there is turn off all notifications except for from people. So like those red dots, you have a lot of, algorithmically generated notifications. This person, you have 27 new likes on this photo. You haven't been on Candy Crush in a while. Things like that. There's not anybody trying to reach you. That's this algorithm calculating that at this time of day for user 72684B, you are likely to return to this app with this notification. So we're trying to get you back in. So going into your settings and turning off all notifications except when a literal person wants to reach you, like a messenger app or texting. I found that very helpful. The second one here is grayscale. This is, depending on what you're doing on your phone, sometimes this can be inconvenient, but there's a way to set up a quick way to switch it back and forth as well. So it doesn't have to be gray all the time. But this similarly just gets rid of those red notification dots. And also when I just look at my phone, I feel like, what is this thing? It just takes away some of that unconscious take out of your phone and think like, okay, wait, do I actually want to go into this or am I just doing it mindlessly? Have you ever opened your phone, scrolled through your apps, scrolled back through your apps, and then closed your phone?
Probably.
It's something I've done when I give talks on this. A lot of people have done. It's like, think about that. What are we doing? We open our phone, we swipe a bunch of apps, like just go through the pages. We don't open anything, and then we go back through, and then we close our phone. What were we doing? I don't know what we were doing. This is a very unconscious habit that I have, and I think some other people have. And just the grayscale helps me just have this immediate, wait, no, I don't mean to be here, and helps me take a step back.
Yeah. No, I've definitely gotten to meant to do something and then forgotten what it was once I got there. The other way to turn off those little red notifications is to go into notifications, and there's a certain setting. Those are badge notifications, and if you turn those off, because I can't stand those red things.
Yeah, and that's great. And I recommend that. That's fantastic. Some people can't bring themselves to go so far, but it's I think that is very helpful. And just really being thoughtful of, okay, what do I want to actually interrupt me? What do I want to give permission to do that? And setting your notifications accordingly. There's a bunch more on the site, but the other one that I'll give that has really been helpful is the charge your device outside your bedroom. First thing in the morning. For many of us, our phone is our alarm clock, right? And so alarm goes off, we hit, for me, hit snooze 4 times and then turn it off. And then immediately what's right there are all the notifications that I missed from the day before. I wake up on my day and I'm immediately behind. And if you think about that as thoughts that are being scheduled into my mind, I would not have thought about these things. I would not have, the first beginning of my day, I would not be filling my brain with all of this other stuff. And so charging your phone outside your bedroom and getting a physical alarm clock is something that's really helpful in just starting your day and thinking about what you actually wanting to do and letting you be proactive and not immediately sort of more stressed and reactive. I've enjoyed that one personally. Airplane mode is another thing some people do. For me, that's not enough. It's too easy to get off of airplane mode and immediately check. Outside the bedroom, I have found to be more effective.
The other thing that Apple has just started to do, I think, and I think it's iOS 11, is if you turn on Do Not Disturb, you have to make it set so that you turn it off even when you're using the phone. It assumes that you just want to be not disturbed when you're not using the phone. But I realize another step that if you were taking notes on your phone if you might still get notifications if you have set that. So it's like go into the settings and the do not disturb and put always, not just.
Yeah, it's a little bit annoying. I know what you mean. I had to do that for writing sometimes too. Yeah, you can like sort of speed beat it and just like turn it on and then stay in your phone. But the moment you close it out, it'll say you have to undo it and redo it. And it's not great. Not the most frustrating of all the problems with tech, but not ideal.
Okay, so that's what we can do on a personal level. What can people do? Just how can they help the mission of Time Well Spent?
So we have a Get Involved section on the page as well. There's a couple of projects that we could use support with, and they're listed there. If you want to make a donation, you can do that as well. There's one of the levers of change that we found. I like the section here of do you have friends who work at technology companies, and just like letting the employees of these companies know how you feel about the products they're making is a powerful tool, because ultimately these companies do run on people, and it's very hard to attract top talent when people don't feel good about your product. And so if you don't feel positively about the way something's making you feel, and if you have an unhealthy relationship with that device, and you know someone who works there, tell them. And then there's some projects you can check out here. And ultimately, I would love to be we get a lot of inbound requests. A lot of people are feeling this pain and wanting to get involved. We would love to be able to involve everybody better, and we're working on ways of doing that. But right now, please, if you do reach out, be patient with us, as it may take us a while to figure out how to plug you in, as we're drowning a bit in inbound.
So go to timewellspent.io. Max, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It was great to talk to you. Check out all of Max's videos at maxstossel.com. And do you have another project that will, how long will we have to wait to see another video from you?
Hopefully a couple of months, but the videos take time.
They do. Yes. Time well spent, of course. I'm sure you're tired of hearing that.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. And I imagine you don't spend that much time on Twitter. How often are you on Twitter? Should people follow you there too?
You can follow me on Twitter. I do my best to only post things when I feel they're really valuable uses of your time. And so I don't spend too much time on the social media, but I am on them and also trapped in this game of trying to build a following for poetry and somewhat hating myself for it.
So that's at Max Stossel, 2 S's, 1 L on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
And thank you for joining us at Triangulation. Triangulation records every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific. And we try to talk to the most interesting people about technology and how it's affecting us as humans and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us. Check out all of our episodes at twit.tv/try, and you can download us using any podcast catcher that you have. We'll see you next week. VR was the question that I was going to ask you about. Do you want to do your VR poem?
Okay, so I was at Disney World as an adult, which is not an experience that I particularly recommend, but it was interesting. And they had one exhibit where you put on this headset, and they take you through all the Disney movies that I loved as a kid. And there was this moment, because they're also they put smells in, and the wind blows against your face when you're flying, and so there's this moment where I dove into the Little Mermaid, and they dropped water from the ceiling. And, in this very sort of realistic environment, it was very confusing because I felt like I saw the future at Disney World and it wasn't real. Or not real like I know real. Not real like we've defined real, but I dove into the virtual sea and I felt the water splash across my face. I heard the ocean in my ears. I saw a mermaid singing right in front of me and I could touch. Well, right through her. Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? And I can't be the only one to see the irony that she wants to be where the people are. She wants to see them dancing. But as a representative sample of supposed to be dancers, we're fine, thank you. Content here in our minds, thank you. Let's turn reality to channel 259. Thank you, walking around on those. What are they called again? Who remembers? Scene change to behind Aladdin and Jasmine on their magic carpet ride. And as I'm marveling at this new fantastic point of view, I realize love could live here too. I could build a whole new world with you, an adventure with you, fly through skies of green and trees of blue. This shining, shimmering, splendid gift is now available for just $19.99 when Squarespace meets Oculus Rift. Scene change to the African plains to where Simba and Nala are playfully playing. So close that I'm literally part of their game, but I can't quite feel the wrestling. Not yet. But give it time. We're still developing. We'll make simulation much more like the real thing. You'll have complete control over everything because we just can't wait to be king. We just can't wait to rule over the worlds we'll create rather than participate in the one we share. And we'll be able to build our own world soon. Let's have tea in Morocco this afternoon. And this evening, I'll build you a palace on the moon, and we'll sip soup on silver spoons. And for dessert, we'll have gravity removed. We'll float through the cosmos with oxygen tubes. I've rejiggered the physics on Mars and Neptune to make them more suitable for you. Our minds' worlds have different rules. We're no longer bound by atmosphere. Nature's limitations wiped clear. You can turn people on and off in here. So by reality channel 8365, my world's only touched by those I decide. I'm completely immersed in the confines of my own mind, opposing ideas left swiped aside. But maybe eventually we'll come to find we needed each other this whole damn time. Maybe this world we're the tiniest piece of has a system of balance we would never dream of, pushing us somewhere we won't consciously scheme up. Maybe we shouldn't have all this power. Maybe going forwards is backwards. Maybe we should go lie in the grass and make love without glasses, even if it barely stimulates orgasm classic. I want to be where the people are, up where they walk, up where they run, up where they play all day in the sun. I wish I could be, wandering free, a part of that world. Thank you.
That was great. That was awesome.
I'm actually, that's more negative on VR than I am. They're incredible applications, helping people regain motion in their legs and, getting over phobias, but it's a very engaging medium, and we need to be very careful with this, how we're building that system as well.
Yeah, that is true.